At my son's wedding, his fiancée pulled out a chair as I was sitting down, and I fell to ground. I hit the marble floor hard. My hip connected first, sending a shock of pain up my spine. My purse scattered across the floor, spilling pills, tissues, and my late husband's reading glasses in every direction. Has someone in your family ever made you question your own worth? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The chair wasn't there when I went to sit. 200 guests watched me hit the marble floor, and the bride's laugh was the loudest sound in the room. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to steal from their own family, this story will shake you to your core. Have you ever been humiliated in front of everyone you care about? Has someone in your family ever made you question your own worth? Do you know what it feels like when the people who should protect you become the ones who hurt you most? This isn't just about a wedding gone wrong. This is about a calculated attack designed to destroy a mother's relationship with her son, and steal over $1 million in the process. If someone humiliated your mother like this, you'd want justice. Subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. Follow along as we uncover how one moment of cruelty revealed a conspiracy that had been building for months. Every detail you're about to hear is documented, time-stamped, and witnessed by people who refuse to stay silent. The ballroom in Charleston was everything my son Andrew had dreamed of for his wedding reception. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in cream silk, and the scent of magnolia blossoms filled the air. Gold ribbons hung from every chair, and champagne flutes caught the light like tiny stars. I had driven 3 hours from Savannah that morning, wearing the navy blue dress Andrew had specifically requested, something that photographs well, Mom. My late husband's watch caught on my wrist as I smoothed my skirt, a small comfort in a room full of strangers. The bride, Emma, glided across the dance floor in her ivory lace gown, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. She had that kind of beauty that photographs demanded, sharp cheekbones, perfect posture, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked in my direction. When dinner was announced, I found my assigned table. Table 12. Not the family table, not even close to it. I was seated with distant cousins and family friends I'd never met. The place card read, Mrs. Helen Morrison, in elegant script, positioned between 2 empty chairs. The servers began bringing out the first course as conversations buzzed around me. I reached for the chair with my name card, the same way I'd sat in thousands of chairs throughout my 68 years of life. That's when Emma appeared beside me. "Oh, Helen," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I need to borrow this chair for the photographer. He needs better angles of the family table." Her hand was already on the back of my chair as I began to lower myself down. The movement felt natural, automatic. After 40 years as a nurse, I'd learned to sit quickly during busy shifts. But the chair moved. Emma pulled it backward just as my weight shifted forward. For a split second, I hung in the air, arms reaching for support that wasn't there. Then gravity took over. I hit the marble floor hard. My hip connected first, sending a shock of pain up my spine. My purse scattered across the floor, spilling pills, tissues, and my late husband's reading glasses in every direction. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. 200 guests turned to stare. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the string quartet paused between notes. And Emma laughed. Not a gasp of concern or an apologetic giggle. A real laugh, bright and deliberate, as if she'd just watched the funniest joke of her life. "Oh my goodness," she announced to the room, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness she used with Andrew. "Someone should probably help her up." Andrew rushed forward, his face flushed with embarrassment. But before he could reach me, Emma whispered something in his ear that made him stop in his tracks. His eyes met mine for just a moment, filled with something I'd never seen before, shame mixed with fear. He stepped back. I stayed on the floor for what felt like hours but was probably only 30 seconds. A waiter finally helped me to my feet while Emma adjusted her dress and returned to greeting guests as if nothing had happened. My hip throbbed, but the deeper pain was watching my son choose his new wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. As the paramedic helped me up, I noticed the photographer's camera was still recording. Every second of it. Have you ever been publicly humiliated by family? Comment, witnessed, if you felt that fall. The ice pack was melting on my bruised hip when the envelope arrived. No return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Back in my Savannah home, everything felt different. The room seemed too quiet, too empty. Even the familiar creak of the hardwood floors sounded lonely. I'd been replaying that moment in the ballroom for 3 days, each memory sharper and more painful than the last. The fall had left me with a deep purple bruise that ran from my hip to my knee, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the image I couldn't shake, Andrew stepping back when Emma whispered in his ear. My own son, choosing her embarrassment over my injury. I was adjusting the ice pack when I heard the mail slot click. Through the front window, I watched the postal truck disappear around the corner. On my welcome mat sat a thick manila envelope with my name written in careful block letters. Inside, I found documents I'd never seen before. Wedding contracts, insurance forms, and liability waivers, all dated 2 weeks before the ceremony. My name appeared in only one section, listed under potential incident risks, alongside elderly guests and mobility concerns. They had planned for me to get hurt. The phone rang as I spread the papers across my kitchen table. Andrew's name appeared on the caller ID, but when I answered, his voice sounded strange. Distant. Mom, I heard you went to the doctor about your fall. I had to make sure nothing was broken, sweetheart. Right. Of course. There was a long pause, filled with the sound of muffled voices in the background. Emma thinks maybe it would be best if we gave you some space for a while. You know, to recover. Space. From my own son. After his wife had deliberately hurt me. Andrew, we need to talk about what really happened at the reception. Nothing happened, Mom. You fell. It was an accident. Emma feels terrible about it. Emma feels terrible. Not him. Her. Son, I raised you to know the difference between an accident and something done on purpose. The line went quiet except for more whispering in the background. When he spoke again, his voice was even more strained. I have to go. Emma and I are meeting with some lawyers today about some business stuff. I'll call you later. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the legal documents spread across the table where Andrew used to eat breakfast during summer visits. The ice pack had completely melted, leaving a damp circle on my dress. On the mantel, my late husband's photo seemed to be watching everything, his gentle eyes asking the same question that was forming in my mind. What else had Emma been planning? Inside the contract, my name appeared in only one place, listed under potential liability risks. Ever gotten paperwork that made you realize you were never meant to see it? I wasn't looking for the trust documents. I was just trying to find Andrew's baby pictures to frame. Then I saw the filing date. My late husband Robert had been meticulous about organizing important papers. Every document had its place in his old oak desk, birth certificates in the top drawer, insurance policies in the middle, and estate papers in the locked bottom drawer. I'd avoided opening it since his funeral 2 years ago, but something about Andrew's distant phone call made me want to see my son's smiling baby face again. The key was still taped under the desk drawer, exactly where Robert had shown me years ago. Just in case something happens to me, Helen. You'll need to know where everything is. I pulled out the hanging folders, looking for the manila envelope labeled Family Photos, Andrew 1995 to 2005. Instead, my fingers found a folder I'd never seen before, labeled Trust Amendment, Expedited. The filing date at the top of the first page made my hands shake, 3 weeks before Andrew's wedding. Robert had established the trust fund 10 years ago using proceeds from his father's Hilton Head property sale. The original documents named me as trustee until Andrew turned 30, with full control over distributions for his education, health, and major life events. The total value, $1.2 million, carefully invested and managed. But this new amendment changed everything. Emma Catherine Beaumont, she wasn't even married to Andrew yet when this was filed. was now listed as co-trustee with full authority to authorize distributions for marital expenses, property acquisitions, and family planning purposes. The signature at the bottom was supposed to be Andrew's. I'd seen my son's handwriting thousands of times, homework assignments, birthday cards, thank you notes after Christmas visits. This signature was close, but the was too sharp, and he never dotted his I with a circle. Someone had practiced this signature, but they hadn't perfected it. In the margin, handwritten notes in the same block letters from the envelope: expedite before ceremony, timing critical for property transfer. Property transfer. My heart pounded as I flipped to the next page. There it was, authorization to use trust funds for the purchase of a $800,000 beach house in Kiowa Island, South Carolina. The closing date was scheduled for next month. I spread all the documents across Robert's desk, my hands trembling as the pieces fell into place. Emma hadn't just planned my humiliation at the wedding. She'd been planning to steal from Andrew's inheritance for months. The most chilling part was how calculated it all was. The wedding invitation that placed me at a distant table, away from family discussions. The chair incident that made me look unstable and possibly litigious. The insurance paperwork that painted me as a risk. She had been setting me up to look like a problem that needed to be managed. I reached for my phone to call Andrew, then stopped. If he'd signed this amendment willingly, calling him would only give Emma time to move the money faster. If he hadn't signed it, if she'd forged his signature, then she was committing fraud, and I needed evidence before making accusations. The signature on the amendment wasn't Andrew's. But someone had forged it perfectly. What would you do with proof of forgery in your own family? Margaret didn't look surprised when I showed her the documents. She just pushed her reading glasses up and said, "I've seen this before." I'd known Margaret Chen for 15 years, ever since she helped us probate Robert's father's estate. She'd worked as a probate clerk in Chatham County for 30 years before retiring, and she had the kind of memory that remembered every suspicious case that crossed her desk. We met at our usual coffee shop on Bull Street, the same place where she'd helped me understand Robert's estate planning after his diagnosis. The morning crowd was thinning out, leaving us with privacy and the comfortable hum of espresso machines in the background. Margaret spread my documents across the small table, her experienced eyes scanning each page with the precision of someone who'd seen thousands of legal filings. Expedited trust amendment, filed on a Friday afternoon, she said, tapping the filing date. That's when people try to slip things through without scrutiny. And look at this signature. She pulled out a magnifying glass from her purse, the same one she'd used during her clerk days. See how the pressure changes in the middle of the That happens when someone lifts the pen to check their work. Your son wouldn't need to check his own signature. But it was the margin notes that really caught her attention. Timing critical for property transfer, she read aloud. Expedite before ceremony. This wasn't Andrew planning his future, Helen. This was someone working around a deadline. Margaret explained how South Carolina's probate laws worked differently than Georgia's. Once a trust amendment was filed and a 30-day waiting period passed, challenging it became much more difficult, especially if the beneficiary appeared to consent to the changes. She needed him married and compliant, Margaret said, pointing to Emma's name on the documents. A wife has legal standing to make decisions for her husband in ways a fiancé can't. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and started making notes. Here's what we need: original signature samples from Andrew, recent ones, not old ones. Bank records showing any unusual activity. And most importantly, we need to file a hold on the trust assets before that 30-day window closes. I looked at the calendar on my phone. 23 days had already passed. Margaret, if I do this, there's no going back. Andrew will have to choose between his wife and his mother. She looked up from her notes, her expression serious but kind. Helen, if this woman forged legal documents to steal from your family, Andrew's already lost more than he knows. The question is whether you're going to let her get away with it. Margaret pulled out a manila folder from her briefcase. These are the other cases. Same signature style, same law firm, same pattern of targeting recent widows with adult children. Inside were 4 other trust amendment cases, all filed within the past 2 years. All involving young women who had married into families with significant assets. All with forged signatures that looked remarkably similar to Andrew's. You're not her first target, Helen. But you might be her last if you're willing to fight. Keep track of that law firm name. You'll see why it matters. The photographer remembered the moment perfectly. I kept rolling because I thought someone might need the footage for insurance. David Martinez had been photographing weddings in Charleston for 12 years. When I called him 3 days after Andrew's reception, he didn't hesitate to meet me at his studio on King Street. His office walls were covered with happy couples, all smiling and blissful, a sharp contrast to why I was there. Mrs. Morrison, I have to tell you, what happened at your son's wedding bothered me all weekend, he said, pulling up the files on his computer. In 12 years, I've never seen a bride react that way to a guest getting hurt. The digital files were organized by timestamp, starting from the cocktail hour through the last dance. David clicked on the folder labeled Reception, Table Service 7:47 p.m. Here's where it gets interesting, he said, adjusting his monitor so I could see clearly. The first clip showed me walking toward table 12, purse in hand, looking for my assigned seat. Emma was visible in the background, talking to someone near the family table. Nothing unusual yet. Now watch this next sequence, David said, clicking to frame 23. Emma appeared beside my chair, her hand already reaching for it before I'd even started to sit down. The timestamp read 7:51 and 33 seconds p.m. See how she's looking past you, toward the back corner? She's making eye contact with someone. Frame 47 showed exactly what he meant. Emma's gaze was fixed on a man in a dark suit standing near the exit doors. He gave her a subtle nod. Who is that man? I asked. No idea. He wasn't in any of the family photos, and he left right after your fall. But watch what happens next. The sequence that followed was even more damning. Emma's deliberate pull of the chair, timed perfectly with my descent. My impact with the marble floor. The scatter of my belongings. And then Emma's laugh, bright, deliberate, and lasting a full 4 seconds. But the most revealing moment came next. Andrew rushed toward me, genuine concern on his face. Emma intercepted him, whispered something in his ear while pointing toward the wedding party table. Andrew's expression changed completely, from worry to what looked like fear. He stepped back and left me on the floor. I've shot over 400 weddings, David said quietly. I've seen accidents, spilled wine, even a few family arguments. But I've never seen someone deliberately hurt a family member and then stop their own husband from helping. David burned the entire sequence onto a DVD and handed it to me in a protective case. Mrs. Morrison, I don't know what's going on in your family, but that woman planned what happened to you. The camera doesn't lie. As I drove back to Savannah, the DVD case felt heavy in my purse. I had proof now, time-stamped, high-definition proof of Emma's cruelty and calculation. Frame 47 showed something else, the bride looking directly at a man in the back corner. He was nodding. Screenshot that frame number in your mind. Who was she signaling? This isn't sloppy work, the estate attorney said, studying the forged signature. Someone practiced this for months. Margaret had recommended James Whitfield, an estate attorney in Atlanta who specialized in trust fraud cases. His office on Peachtree Street felt serious and professional, with law books lining every wall and certificates that spoke to decades of experience. I'd driven 2 hours to meet him, bringing every document I'd found plus David's DVD. James reviewed everything with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen his share of family deceptions. Mrs. Morrison, this signature analysis alone is worth pursuing, he said, holding Andrew's supposed signature under a magnifying light. But combined with the video evidence and the timeline, we have something much stronger. He spread out comparison samples I'd brought, Andrew's signature from recent birthday cards, bank documents, and his college graduation thank you notes. Under magnification, the differences were clear. Your son writes with consistent pressure and natural flow. This amendment signature shows hesitation marks, lift patterns, and practice strokes. Someone studied his handwriting extensively. James pulled out a file folder thick with similar cases. Trust amendment fraud is more common than people realize, especially targeting families with recent losses. The perpetrators usually follow a pattern. Identify the target family, establish a relationship with the beneficiary, then manipulate legal documents during emotional or transitional periods. 6 months of planning to steal from a grieving family. Subscribe so you catch predators before they strike. But it was the margin notes that really captured his attention. Timing critical for property transfer. This suggests coordination with other parties. Real estate transactions, legal filings, possibly even financial institutions. This wasn't Emma working alone. James explained the legal process ahead. First, we'd file an emergency motion to freeze all trust assets, preventing any transfers while the case was investigated. Then we'd request forensic handwriting analysis and demand production of all related documents from the law firm that filed the amendment. The good news is that South Carolina takes trust fraud seriously, especially when it involves forged S. James opened his calendar. We have a narrow window here. Once that 30-day filing period expires, Emma gains full access to the trust assets. That's next Friday, 6 days from now. He handed me a stack of legal forms. I'm going to prepare an emergency motion for tomorrow morning. We'll need Andrew's cooperation for handwriting samples and testimony, but we can start the process without him if necessary. The drive back to Savannah gave me time to think about what came next. Filing this motion meant accusing Emma of fraud. It meant forcing Andrew to choose between protecting his inheritance and protecting his wife. It meant potentially destroying their marriage. But it also meant preventing her from stealing money that Robert had carefully saved for Andrew's future. My phone buzzed with a text message as I pulled into my driveway. It was from Andrew. Mom, Emma says you've been asking questions about our finances. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Emma says. Not, I think, or we feel. Emma says. The attorney slid a court filing across the desk. We're requesting an immediate freeze on all trust assets. Predict, will the court grant the freeze before she transfers everything? Andrew's voice was different on the phone. Strained. Like someone was coaching him on what to say. I called him that evening after returning from Atlanta, hoping to have an honest conversation about what I'd discovered. But from the moment he answered, I could tell Emma was nearby. Mom, we need to talk about this trust situation, he said, his words coming out rehearsed and careful. Yes, we do, sweetheart. I found some documents that. Emma explained everything to me. About the amendment, about the property purchase, all of it. We're planning to buy a house in Kiowa Island for our future family. Future family. Emma's words, not his. Andrew had never talked about wanting children, and he'd certainly never mentioned Kiowa Island before meeting her. Andrew, did you actually sign those trust papers yourself? There was a long pause. In the background, I could hear muffled voices and what sounded like papers rustling. Of course I signed them, Mom. Why would you even ask that? But his voice cracked slightly on course, the same way it had when he was 12 and trying to convince me he'd finished his homework. Son, I'm looking at your signature right now, compared to the birthday card you sent me last month. They don't match. Another pause, longer this time. People's signatures change, Mom. I've been signing a lot of legal documents lately. Wedding stuff, you know. I heard Emma's voice clearly this time. Tell her about the timeline. The thing is, Andrew continued, we really need this house purchase to go through. Emma's family has connections in Charleston, and it would be good for my real estate career. Emma's family. Emma's career plans. Nothing about what Andrew actually wanted. Sweetheart, can we meet somewhere private? Just you and me? I have some things to show you that I think you need to see. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Emma says it's better if we handle family finances as a married couple. Emma says. Again. My heart ached hearing my independent, thoughtful son reduced to repeating his wife's directions. Andrew, remember when you were little and got in trouble at school? You always told me the truth, even when it was hard. I need that honesty now. The line went quiet except for more whispering in the background. Mom, I have to go. We have another appointment with the lawyers today. Wait, what lawyers? Just some business stuff. Property law, estate planning. Emma's handling most of it since she understands this better than I do. Emma understands it better. My son, who had a business degree and had been managing property sales for 3 years, suddenly needed his wife to handle basic legal matters. Before you go, just answer me one question. Are you happy, Andrew? Really happy? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. I'm fine, Mom. Everything's fine. I just need you to stop digging into things that don't concern you. Before he hung up, Andrew whispered, Mom, she has something on me too. Something I can't let get out. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in my quiet kitchen. What secret could make a son choose a thief over his mother? The judge's gavel came down once. Motion granted. All trust assets frozen pending investigation. I sat in the Chatham County Courthouse the next morning, watching James present our evidence to Judge Patricia Reynolds. The courtroom was nearly empty except for court staff and one other attorney who appeared to be taking notes. James had done his homework. He presented the forged signature analysis, the video evidence from the wedding, and the timeline showing how everything was coordinated around Andrew's marriage. But it was Margaret's research that really caught the judge's attention. Your Honor, we've identified a pattern of similar trust fraud cases involving the same law firm and similar signature forgeries. The defendant appears to be part of a larger scheme targeting recent widows and their adult children. Judge Reynolds studied the documents through her reading glasses, comparing Andrew's real signatures with the forged amendment. Mr. Whitfield, this signature analysis is quite compelling. And this video evidence shows premeditation for the incident at the wedding? Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff was deliberately injured to create grounds for painting her as unstable and litigious, thereby justifying her exclusion from trust decisions. One gavel changed everything. Subscribe so you don't miss justice in action. The opposing attorney, representing the law firm that had filed Emma's amendment, seemed caught off guard by the depth of our evidence. He argued that family disputes shouldn't involve the courts, that this was simply a misunderstanding between in-laws. Judge Reynolds wasn't convinced. Counselor, forged signatures and documented fraud are not family misunderstandings. They're crimes. Motion granted. All assets in the Morrison Family Trust are frozen pending full investigation. She set a hearing date for 2 weeks out and ordered all parties to preserve any documents related to the trust amendment. Walking out of court, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, hope. James shook my hand on the courthouse steps. This is just the first step, Mrs. Morrison. The asset freeze protects the money, but proving fraud and getting the amendment overturned will take more work. My phone buzzed as we talked. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your court victory. Too bad it won't last. Then another text, this one with a photo attached. It showed Andrew sitting in what looked like a lawyer's office, signing documents while Emma stood behind him with her hand on his shoulder. The timestamp showed it was taken this morning, less than an hour after our court hearing. Walking out of court, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper, drop this or Andrew pays. Victory or new threat? What would you choose? The man from the wedding video was waiting in my driveway at 7 a.m. He looked tired, like he'd been driving all night. I recognized him immediately from frame 47 of David's footage, the same dark suit, the same careful posture, the same watchful eyes. But now, instead of standing in the back of a ballroom giving signals, he was leaning against a black sedan in front of my house. I considered not answering the door, but something about his body language seemed different. He wasn't threatening or aggressive. He looked conflicted. When I finally opened the front door, he held up his hands to show he wasn't carrying anything dangerous. Mrs. Morrison, my name is Detective Ray Collins. I'm retired from Charleston PD, and I work as a private investigator now. I need to talk to you about Emma Beaumont. I invited him in, keeping my phone within reach and the front door unlocked. He sat heavily in Robert's old recliner and pulled out a thick manila folder. I was hired 6 months ago to do background research on your family, he said, opening the folder. Emma paid me to dig up anything that could be used as leverage against family members who might oppose her marriage to Andrew. The folder contained photographs, financial records, medical reports, and detailed profiles of everyone in Andrew's life. There were pictures of me grocery shopping, attending church, visiting Robert's grave. Information about my nursing career, my retirement savings, even my prescription medications. She wanted ammunition, Ray continued. Ways to control or discredit anyone who might interfere with her plans. But it was the next section that made my blood run cold. Ray had investigated Andrew's work history and discovered something Emma was using against him: 3 real estate transactions where Andrew had accepted cash payments without properly reporting them to his broker or the IRS. Small amounts, but enough to cost him his license and potentially lead to criminal charges if reported. She found out about this before they got engaged, Ray explained. That's when she knew she had him under control. The folder showed how Emma had systematically researched Andrew's finances, his career vulnerabilities, his relationships, even his childhood insecurities. She'd identified exactly what leverage she needed to keep him compliant. Mrs. Morrison, I've been a cop for 25 years and a PI for 5 more. I've seen domestic abuse, financial fraud, family manipulation. But I've never seen anyone plan this methodically to destroy a family. Ray pulled out another folder, this one even thicker. Emma Beaumont isn't her real name. It's Emma Catherine Walsh, and she's done this before. 4 other families in the past 3 years, always targeting recent widows with adult children who have access to significant assets. He showed me newspaper clippings, court records, and police reports from South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Each case followed the same pattern: meet a vulnerable young man with wealthy family connections, quickly progress to marriage, manipulate legal documents, then disappear with the assets once the fraud was discovered. The difference with your family is that she got greedy. Usually, she settles for smaller amounts and moves on quickly. But your husband's trust is worth more than all her previous targets combined. Ray handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here. The background research, the other cases, her real identity, even recordings of some of our conversations where she talked about neutralizing the mother problem. He stood up to leave, but turned back at the door. Mrs. Morrison, I quit working for her yesterday. What she's doing to your family isn't just fraud, it's evil. And your son has no idea how deep this goes. He handed me a flash drive. There are 17 families. You're not her first target. 17 families targeted. How many never fought back? The spreadsheet had names, ages, estate values, and vulnerability scores. I was listed as moderate risk, isolated, recent widow. Back in my kitchen, I opened Ray's flash drive on my laptop. What I found was more chilling than anything I could have imagined. Emma, or Emma Walsh, as her real name appeared to be, had created a detailed database of potential targets across the Southeast. The spreadsheet contained over 50 families, organized by state, asset value, and what she called acquisition difficulty. My family's entry was thorough: Morrison, Helen, age 68, widow 2 years, son Andrew, unmarried, real estate, financial vulnerabilities identified. Trust assets $1.2 million, Hilton Head property. Risk level, moderate, geographically distant, limited social connections, protective of son relationship. But we weren't her first target, or even her most recent. The Thompson family in Jacksonville, $800,000 inheritance from a grandfather's shipping business. Emma had married their son David in 2021, filed fraudulent trust amendments, and disappeared with most of the assets before the family realized what happened. The Peterson family in Atlanta, $650,000 life insurance payout. Emma's marriage to their son lasted 8 months before she vanished, leaving behind forged documents and emptied accounts. They hunted widows like prey. Subscribe to learn how they choose victims. Each case followed an identical pattern. Emma would research families online through obituaries, social media, and public records. She'd identify recently widowed mothers with adult sons who had access to significant assets but also some kind of vulnerability, financial problems, career issues, legal troubles. Then she'd engineer a meeting with the son, usually through work connections or social events. The courtship was always fast, pressured, with talk of immediate marriage and starting a family. The legal manipulation came next: trust amendments, power of attorney documents, property transfers, all filed quickly during the engagement or honeymoon period when families were distracted by wedding planning. Finally, the isolation phase, turning the son against his family, creating conflicts, manufacturing reasons why the mother couldn't be trusted with financial decisions. In most cases, by the time the families realized they were being defrauded, Emma had already transferred the assets and disappeared. But Ray's files contained something even more disturbing: Emma wasn't working alone. The same law firm appeared in multiple cases, Beaumont and Associates in Charleston. The same private investigator had done background research on several families. The same notary had witnessed multiple suspicious document signings. This was an organized network, targeting grieving families across multiple states with military precision. The most recent entry in the spreadsheet made my hands shake. Harrison, Patricia, age 71, widow 6 months, son Michael, divorced, struggling financially. Estate value $900,000. Status: target acquired, initial contact established. Patricia Harrison was my neighbor. I'd seen a young woman visiting Mrs. Harrison's house recently, someone she'd introduced as Michael's new girlfriend. The same blonde hair, the same practiced smile, the same way of taking control of conversations. Emma was already working on her next victim while still trying to steal from my family. At the bottom of the list, next target, confirmed. My neighbor's name was highlighted. Would you warn the next victim, even if it risked your own case? The registered letter arrived at her Charleston address at 9:17 a.m. By 9:45, my phone was ringing. I'd spent the night preparing the most comprehensive legal package of my life. James had helped me organize everything: Ray's evidence files, the video footage from the wedding, the forged trust documents, the spreadsheet of targeted families, and copies of similar fraud cases from across the Southeast. But I didn't stop there. I also included a letter to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, copies sent to the South Carolina Bar Association, and notifications to the district attorneys in every county where Emma had committed fraud. If she wanted to play hardball, I'd show her what 68 years of life experience looked like when pushed into a corner. The first call came from Emma herself. "You have no idea what you're messing with," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. The sweet, practiced tone she used around Andrew was completely gone. "Actually, Emma, or should I call you Emma Walsh? I know exactly what I'm dealing with. A career criminal who preys on grieving families." The line went silent for a moment. "That evidence won't hold up in court. Ray Collins is a disgraced ex-cop with credibility problems." "Maybe. But 17 families might disagree with you." Another pause. "What do you want?" "I want you to withdraw the trust amendment, annul your marriage to my son, and disappear from our lives. You have 48 hours. Emma's laugh was cold, nothing like the bright sound from the wedding reception. "That's not going to happen, Helen. See, I've got insurance too." She texted me a photo while we were still on the phone. It showed Andrew in handcuffs, being led into what looked like a police station. "Those unreported cash payments your son took. I made sure the IRS got an anonymous tip this morning. Andrew's being questioned about tax evasion right now." My heart stopped. "You're destroying an innocent man to cover your crimes." "I'm protecting my investment. Andrew knew what he was getting into when he married me. The only question now is whether you want to save your son's freedom or his inheritance. When cornered, predators get desperate. What's your worst-case scenario?" But I'd learned something important from Ray's files. Emma's previous victims had all backed down when she escalated. That's how she'd gotten away with this for so long. Emma, you made one mistake. You assumed I'd choose my son's comfort over his future. I hung up and immediately called James. The IRS complaint won't stick, he assured me after I explained what happened. Andrew's violations are minor, and we have evidence that Emma orchestrated everything. But she's right about one thing, this is going to get ugly before it gets better. 20 minutes later, Emma called back. I'll make you a deal. Drop the fraud charges, let the trust amendment stand, and I'll make sure Andrew's tax problems disappear. No deal. Then you'll lose everything. Your son's freedom, his career, and the money anyway. Maybe. But you'll lose 17 federal fraud charges and a lifetime in prison. Her final call was different. Calm. I'll destroy Andrew before I let you win. The line went dead, but I knew this wasn't over. Is it too late to save this family relationship? Andrew was waiting in my living room when I got home. But he wasn't alone. Margaret was there, and she was holding a thick manila envelope. I'd been at the courthouse filing additional fraud complaints when Margaret called and asked if she could bring Andrew to my house. She wouldn't explain why over the phone, just said it was important and that Andrew had asked for her help. Now, seeing my son sitting in Robert's chair with his head in his hands, I understood. The weight of Emma's manipulation had finally become too much for him to carry alone. Mom, he said without looking up, I'm sorry. For everything. Margaret set the envelope on my coffee table. Andrew came to see me this morning after Emma had him arrested. He brought these documents with him. Inside the envelope were papers I'd never seen before. The original conversations between Andrew and Emma's tax complaint, copies of their text messages, and most importantly, a recording Emma had made of herself threatening to destroy his life if he didn't cooperate with the trust fraud. She made me record myself practicing your signature, Andrew said, finally meeting my eyes. Hours and hours of practice until I could forge it perfectly. She said it was just for backup paperwork, that we'd never actually use it. But it was the text messages that revealed the full scope of Emma's control. Emma, your mother is going to ruin everything we've built together. Andrew, she's just worried about the family money. Emma, the money that should be ours anyway. Your father would have wanted you to have it now, not when you're 30. Andrew, I don't know, Em. This feels wrong. Emma, do you want me to release those tax documents to the IRS? Because I will. The messages continued for weeks, showing how Emma had systematically isolated Andrew from me and manipulated his fear of legal consequences. She told me you were trying to control my life, Andrew said. That you'd never accept her as part of the family. Every time I wanted to call you, she'd remind me about the tax problems and say you'd just make everything worse. Margaret pulled out another folder. There's more, Helen. Andrew also brought me this. It was Emma's real driver's license, credit cards, and a passport, all in the name Emma Catherine Walsh. But there was also a marriage certificate from Florida, dated 18 months ago. Emma was already married to someone else. The truth always surfaces. Subscribe so lies don't bury your family. She was never legally married to me, Andrew said, his voice breaking. Everything was fake. The wedding, the marriage license, the trust papers, all of it. The bigamy revelation changed everything. Not only had Emma committed fraud, but she'd never actually been Andrew's wife. Every legal document she'd filed was invalid. Andrew, I said carefully, why didn't you tell me about the tax problems from the beginning? Because I was ashamed, Mom. I made stupid mistakes when I was starting out, and I was terrified of going to prison. When Emma said she could help me handle it quietly, it seemed like the answer. He showed me the original tax documents Emma had used to blackmail him. The unreported income totaled less than $15,000 over 3 years, enough to trigger penalties and professional consequences, but hardly the criminal conspiracy Emma had made it seem. Son, we could have handled this together. A good accountant, maybe some penalty payments, but nothing worth destroying our family over. Andrew looked at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, how do I get out of this marriage without losing everything? I reached across and took his hand. You already did. You chose truth over fear. Everything else, we can fix. Is it too late to save this family relationship? The bride didn't fight the annulment. She just asked for one thing, 48 hours to handle some business. James called me early Monday morning with news I wasn't expecting. Emma's attorney contacted us this weekend. She wants to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? Complete withdrawal of the trust amendment, annulment of the marriage based on fraud, and restitution for legal costs. In exchange, we agree not to pursue federal charges for the bigamy and interstate fraud. It seemed too easy. James, this woman has been planning this for months. She doesn't just give up. That's what I thought too. But her attorney says she's already moved on to other opportunities. Apparently, staying in one place too long increases her risk of getting caught. The annulment hearing was scheduled for Wednesday morning. Emma didn't attend, sending her attorney to represent her interests. Judge Reynolds reviewed the evidence of bigamy and fraud, then granted the annulment without hesitation. This marriage was invalid from the beginning, she ruled. All related legal documents are hereby voided. Andrew sat beside me in the courtroom, looking younger than he had in months. The weight of Emma's manipulation was finally lifting from his shoulders. But something bothered me about how easily Emma had surrendered. That afternoon, Ray Collins called with disturbing news. Mrs. Morrison, Emma left Charleston yesterday, but not alone. She took Michael Harrison with her, your neighbor's son. My heart sank. Patricia Harrison, the widow next door, had fallen for the same scheme I'd barely escaped. Ray, did she clean out Patricia's accounts too? Working on it. But there's something else. Emma left behind a storage unit full of documents from other cases. The FBI raided it this morning. The storage unit contained evidence of fraud schemes across 7 states, involving dozens of families. Bank records, forged documents, fake identities, even maps marking potential targets. Emma hadn't just been targeting individuals, she'd been running a criminal enterprise. She's gone, Mrs. Morrison. Her real name, Emma Walsh, is now on federal watch lists. She won't be able to pull this scheme again, at least not easily. That evening, I sat on my front porch with Andrew, watching the sunset over Savannah's tree-lined streets. For the first time in months, the silence between us felt comfortable. Mom, how did you know to keep fighting when everyone told you to let it go? Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. Your father taught me that. Andrew nodded, then asked the question that had been weighing on both of us. Do you think Patricia Harrison will ever forgive me for not warning her sooner? But that 48 hours gave her time to disappear. Her last known location, Miami International Airport. Justice served, but at what cost? Should some people just vanish? The trust fund was intact. Every penny accounted for. But the real treasure was the handwritten note Andrew left on my kitchen table. 3 weeks after Emma's disappearance, life was slowly returning to normal. The legal battles were over, the asset freeze had been lifted, and Andrew had moved back to Savannah while he sorted out his career and his future. The note was waiting for me after church on Sunday morning. Mom, I know saying sorry isn't enough for what I put you through. I let fear make me choose a stranger over the woman who raised me to be better than that. You fought for our family when I was too scared to fight for myself. I promised to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of being your son. Love, Andrew. The trust fund had been restored to its original terms, with me as sole trustee until Andrew turned 30. But more importantly, Andrew had asked me to help him understand the finances so he could make better decisions in the future. We spent hours going through Robert's investment strategies, the property holdings, and the long-term planning he'd done for our family's future. It was healing for both of us, connecting us back to Robert's memory and his hopes for Andrew's life. Dad was really smart about money, wasn't he? Andrew said one afternoon, reviewing the portfolio performance. He was smart about a lot of things. But mostly, he was smart about love. He knew that protecting the people you care about sometimes means making hard choices. The tax issues that Emma had used to control Andrew were resolved with a good accountant and penalty payments totaling less than $3,000. His real estate license was suspended for 6 months, but not revoked. He was already talking about returning to work with a renewed focus on honest business practices. Don't let shame keep you quiet. Subscribe for courage. But the most meaningful change was in our relationship. Andrew started calling every few days, not because he needed something, but just to talk. He asked about my day, my health, my memories of his father. The conversations we'd lost during Emma's manipulation were slowly coming back. Margaret helped us establish a monthly family dinner tradition, something we'd never had before but both realized we needed. She'd become more than just our legal ally, she'd become family. We also started a support group for families who'd been targeted by fraud schemes. Patricia Harrison joined after her son Michael returned from Florida, having realized Emma's deception before losing too much money. Other families began reaching out as news of Emma's arrest spread. The FBI investigation revealed that our case had helped identify and prosecute a fraud network that had stolen millions from families across the Southeast. Emma Walsh was eventually arrested in Texas under another false identity. The last envelope in the mail wasn't legal documents. It was a wedding invitation, Andrew's second chance at real love. What would you preserve for a future you might never see? This time, I walked my son down the aisle myself. And when I sat down at the family table, the chair was exactly where it belonged. Andrew's second wedding was everything his first one wasn't: honest, joyful, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about both bride and groom. The ceremony took place in Forsyth Park, under the Spanish moss and ancient oaks that had watched over Savannah families for generations. Lisa, Andrew's new fiancée, was a kindergarten teacher he'd met through our church. She was kind, genuine, and had insisted that I help plan every detail of their wedding. When she asked me to walk Andrew down the aisle, "Because you're the most important woman in his life," I cried happy tears for the first time in months. The wedding was small, maybe 50 people, but every person there was chosen with care. Margaret served as Lisa's matron of honor. Ray Collins attended with his wife, having become an unexpected friend through our shared experience. Even David Martinez, the wedding photographer, came as a guest, bringing his own camera to document this celebration properly. During the reception, Lisa made a toast that brought everyone to tears. To Helen Morrison, who taught us all that real love doesn't just celebrate the good times, it fights for what's right, even when fighting is hard. But the moment that meant the most to me came during the father-daughter dance. Since Lisa's father had passed away years earlier, Andrew asked me to share the dance with his new wife. As we swayed to the music, Lisa whispered, "Thank you for saving him. I almost lost the love of my life before I even met him." "You would have found each other anyway," I told her. "Good people always do." The trust fund that Emma had tried to steal was now being put to use exactly as Robert had intended. Andrew and Lisa bought a modest house in Savannah's historic district, close enough that I could walk over for Sunday dinners. They were talking about starting a family, and Andrew was building a new real estate practice based on integrity and community connections. Real love builds up, never tears down. Subscribe for more stories of families that heal. Most importantly, Andrew had learned to recognize the difference between people who wanted to control him and people who wanted to support him. The experience with Emma had been painful, but it had also given him wisdom that would protect him for the rest of his life. As I watched him dance with his new wife, surrounded by friends and family who genuinely cared about their happiness, I felt Robert's presence as strongly as I had since his funeral. He would have loved Lisa. He would have been proud of how Andrew had grown through this experience. The evening ended with Andrew and Lisa cutting their cake while everyone cheered. No deliberate cruelty, no calculated humiliation, no hidden agendas. Just pure joy and the promise of a future built on truth. Sometimes you have to fall hard to learn who will actually help you stand up. The marble floor taught me the difference between family and strangers who happen to share your name. What's the most important lesson from this grandmother's journey? Share it below. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that prove family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty, truth, and having the courage to fight for what's right. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently? And remember, the strongest people aren't those who never fall, they're the ones who get back up and make sure others don't have to fall the same way.